Sony and PlayStation, masters of the single-player campaign story-driven experience. But when it comes to live services, their track record is kind of utter ass. Right here we have a list of the various live service projects that Sony have either released, are still in development, or have been canceled. And you can see how many live service projects have been canceled, from The Last of Us live service to Twisted Metal live service, Spider-Man live service, God of War live service, so on and so forth. And then there are a couple that have released, like Destruction All-Stars and Gran Turismo 7 and Helldivers 2, with Helldivers 2 really being the only high-profile live service from Sony that I can think of that was actually successful. And that's a live service that actually stood out from the pack and did its own thing. But then you've got the likes of Concord, which Sony thought would be like the next Star Wars, and that released, and 2 weeks later it got shut down, and they issued full refunds, and it made $0 after spending hundreds of millions on it. But then there's the stuff that's still cooking right now, whether it's Marathon, Bungie's upcoming game, that, I'll have to wait and see how that game does. They did revamp a bunch of stuff after the delay, and they've started to show that off, and it does look better. But whether it'll be enough to make this game succeed as a live service remains to be seen. And then there's all the Horizon stuff that Sony and PlayStation are working on, like a Horizon multiplayer game. And that's a game that finally got announced just kind of randomly out of nowhere 3 days ago on February 5th, 2026. The Horizon multiplayer game is titled Horizon Hunters Gathering, a Horizon live service, essentially. And the best way I can describe it is if you took Monster Hunter or Dauntless and Overwatch Fighter a little bit, made it more of not a hero shooter, but a hero monster slayer. You've got characters with really distinct appearances and abilities and toolkits and roles and weapons and whatnot. Though in this scenario, you can't actually pick a role for each character. You're not restricted in that area, but each character still overall is really distinct. And much like a Monster Hunter style experience, you've got your main social hub, and then from there you go out into one of the various biomes, do missions, and hunt, in this case, the machines that are monster shaped, with numerous mission types, including Machine Incursion, which kind of plays a lot like Elden Ring Night Rain, where you go around the world beating ads and looting randomized weapon upgrades and perks and stat increases and whatnot that leans into roguelite elements. There's even a Battle Royale style circle that closes in akin to Night Rain and everything, and at the end of that you fight a big boss and hope that you're well equipped enough for it. Then there's Cauldron Descent, which is this multi-stage dungeon-like setup with different chambers that you progress through. That also feels very roguelite inspired. And it all comes packaged with a very distinct art style from what you normally associate with Horizon. Definitely something a lot more stylized and cartoony. It reminds me of Arcane or, the Spider-Verse animated movies, maybe with a sprinkle of Borderlands and Fortnite and the like. And the characters are a lot more animated, and it feels like it's meant to be a lot more accessible. And the reception surrounding this game has not been particularly exceptional. It's not been this resounding success from a marketing standpoint. I mean, just scrolling down, you'll find that the likes to dislikes ratio speaks for itself with, 19,000 likes, but a whopping almost 80,000 dislikes. And all of this speaks to just the general fatigue surrounding this pursuit for live services, especially with franchises that people associate with single-player experiences, where it feels like it's kind of being ham-fisted. It feels like, they're just trying to make live services out of everything, just in the hopes that it sticks and it becomes a recurrently monetizable venture that Sony can profit off of. It just feels really forced and kind of homogenized amidst all of the other live services that are pursuing similar trends as what this game is kind of showing. And so yeah, scrolling down, the comments are not kind to this particular game and trailer, with the top comment here reading the bravest thing about this trailer is leaving the comments section open. People highlighting, from Killzone to this, referring to Guerrilla Game Studios. Now, they're still working on a single-player Horizon game, but for people who prefer the single-player Horizon games, the unfortunate thing is that this co-op multiplayer Horizon game is taking resources away from Horizon 3 right now, with Jason Schreier having reported that Horizon 3 is likely still ways off because Guerrilla Games is currently focused on their co-op game Horizon Hunters Gathering. That's not to say that Horizon 3 isn't in active development, but Horizon Hunters Gathering being the main focus, it does mean that resources were pulled away from Horizon 3 and that development surrounding Horizon 3 right now is not the top priority. They first want to get this game out. And given that Horizon started as a single-player series and it's what fans of this series prefer, for them to make a Horizon multiplayer game and focus on that and put Horizon 3 on the back burner, it's just not something that Horizon fans are a big fan of. And then gamers in general feeling the live service fatigue and seeing how all of the live services all, again, seem kind of homogenized. Nothing seems like new and fresh anymore. It all seems to be like combinations and amalgams and kind of copies of other games, but remixed a little bit here and there. It doesn't pave the road to like a great reception. This is not what people wanted or were looking forward to, especially if you're going to attach the Horizon name to it. It's like people associate something very specific to Horizon, and it's not Hunter's Gathering. And so yeah, top comments on YouTube include things like, have I ever told you the definition of insanity, referring to this idea of like doing the same thing over and over and over again when it continues to fail. Then there's another top comment here just saying Horizon Zero Income, or this one up here saying, how many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man? Horizon Forbidden Wallet. Gorilla Team, please blink twice if you're in danger, so on and so forth. Generally, the reception surrounding this game has been pretty scathing, to people going, meh, I don't know, I'll have to wait and see. And when it comes to a live service, first impressions do matter, because that's how you gauge how many people are genuinely interested and hyped and supporting the game on day one. And the more of an influx of players you get on day one for a live service, the more secure you can be that you can ride this out for the long term, make that recurrent revenue that allows you to support the recurrent expenses surrounding a live service for the long term. But when you're immediately met with this kind of derision, what that usually indicates is that people are hesitant to engage with yet another part-time to full-time job. That's what live services tend to be. And with how oversaturated the market is, Horizon Hunter's Gathering will have its work cut out for itself in order to win audiences who already have their go-to live services. Only time will tell whether Hunter's Gathering will be compelling enough as a game and its gameplay loop will be exciting enough for it to keep people coming back. But yeah, a lot of people are just disappointed that Horizon is being turned into this multiplayer game. It'd be one thing if it was an additional mode to a future Horizon game. But instead, it's a full-fledged Horizon multiplayer game that gives vibes of other companies who specialized in single-player experiences and have tried to ship a live service only for them to fail. We saw it with BioWare and Anthem. We saw it with Arcane when they shipped Redguard. We saw it with Marvel Avengers when Crystal Dynamics went from making single-player games like Tomb Raider to then making a live service like Marvel's Avengers. All of those have just flopped, which is why sentiments like these are popping up a lot. We call this the BioWare, where you interrupt your well-liked single-player game development to make a live service, especially after reports that Horizon 3 has been kind of deprioritized in favor of making Horizon Hunter's Gathering. And the thing about Horizon Hunter's Gathering is that when I look at it, it doesn't necessarily look like a bad game. You can tell that a lot of care has been put into things like the combat animations, everything looks really fluid. Even the art style, while it's got the same familiar cartoony stylized thing that a lot of other stuff's going for right now, again, very Arcane-esque or Spider-Verse-esque, it still visually looks clean. And, I think if it weren't a Horizon game, people might look at it with interest and be detached from the expectations that come with the Horizon series, but it is being promoted as a Horizon game, and its art style is not in line with how people associate Horizon, which is something a little more realistic and grounded and vibrant, but still photorealistic. The tone of Horizon Hunter's Gathering is a stark contrast from the single-player games that, really does take itself seriously and the stakes feel high. Whereas here with Hunter's Gathering, everyone's smirking and having a good time and feeling all badass, like there are no stakes involved. It's like they know they're the protagonists of this series. That feeling of they know they have plot armor. And even the combat itself, while Horizon obviously has a lot of extraordinary things in its combat that's not, fully realistic, it still feels somewhat grounded. Whereas when you look at Horizon Hunter's Gathering, it almost feels like an anime version of Horizon's combat, where you've got a lot of exaggerated elements with a lot of super powery things that, you may not necessarily associate with the Horizon that you know from the single-player games. It's not that the game looks bad necessarily. In fact, combat looks fluid enough, and it feels like it could be a good time with friends especially, but there's just this dissonance with what Horizon represents to fans. There's a dissonance with what this series and IP is, both in terms of tone and art direction, and even aspects of gameplay, that I think might end up alienating fans of the series And then for people who are not familiar with Horizon, who might look at this game and be interested, they'll have to do extraordinary things to stand out from the pack, because otherwise you're risking people coming in, checking it out for a few rounds, and then leaving and going back to their go-to live services. What Horizon Hunters Gathering is doing here almost reminds me of like X-Defiant. Do you remember that, where they took the Tom Clancy brand and tried to hippify it with like that urban graffiti style and, make everything a lot more colorful and a lot more like, almost like FIFA Street, but for shooters?
It's fast-paced firefights meets punk rock mosh pit.
What X-Defiant is to Tom Clancy is what Hunter's Gathering feels like to the Horizon series. I think this game would have almost like benefited from being a new IP than being based on Horizon, because that way people can judge it for its own merits rather than it being attached to the Horizon series, where there are very specific expectations on what that IP is. But with all said and done, what will ultimately define the potential success of this game is when people get their hands on it and how fun it actually is to play, how addictive it is, how word of mouth spreads about this title, or whether word of mouth doesn't really spread all that much. I'm also curious to see what its monetization strategy is. Is it going to be free to play, or is it going to be a game you have to purchase at a premium cost, likely like, I don't know, $40? And then, how much microtransactions will be infused in there? How's the progression going to work? What's the gameplay loop like? And does it have enough bones? And is it feature complete enough that it's something you can come back to constantly and have it feel fresh every single time, and something that you can play with friends or with strangers and it be addictive enough to carry it into the long-term future? Those are the questions that we don't know yet until we actually play it and feel out what it all, plays like. Right now, I'm really uncertain about this game's future, especially given its rather poor reception, mostly negative reception, which doesn't necessarily speak to the quality of the game, but it does speak to, audience interest surrounding this specific version of Horizon, this specific Horizon live service. And it's just not looking good. It's not off to a good start, but maybe that'll change over time as people become more acclimated and familiar with the title, especially if they start hosting playtests and betas and whatnot, which they said they would do in their announcement video. So that will really say a lot. For my part, I'm someone who loves Monster Hunter, so Hunter's Gathering, depending on how it functions as a game, could be something that interests me, but my first impression of it isn't, holy shit, I gotta play this and I can't wait for it. It's just, kind of like cautious optimism slash, a sense of foreboding in terms of its ability to perform as a live service and do tremendous numbers that Sony expects out of continuously shooting darts in the dark until they one day hit a live service bullseye, is what I feel like is ultimately happening with how many IPs that are traditionally single player they're trying to turn into multiplayer. And again, I've seen Sony live services flop time after time. And, we've seen tons of cancellations for, some of the biggest IPs that they've tried to turn into live services, whether it's Last of Us or Spider-Man or God of War. And Sony doesn't inspire a whole lot of confidence when it comes to how they tackle live services. And I know they acquired Bungie for the sake of helping them with their live service endeavors, but even Bungie is struggling with live service right now, with Destiny 2 kind of falling off by the wayside, and Marathon, its reception being extremely mixed because of the genre that they're pursuing, extraction shooter, where it felt like they took the Marathon IP, which has such a unique aesthetic, and they made the most generic extraction shooter, trend chasing live service possible. They have overhauled a lot of aspects of that game since its playtest and since it was first announced, so maybe it'll do well down the line, but even now, reception surrounding Marathon is still ultimately fairly mixed, so I don't know. I just don't feel Sony's particularly well positioned when it comes to live services. And Horizon Hunters Gathering, when I look at it from that trailer and announcement video and the gameplay overview, I don't get this rush of excitement looking at it. I do see some potential fun that you can have here and there, but is that enough? Is the potential for a little fun enough to carry this live service into the long-term future and make it something genuinely profitable and, a breakout game? I don't know quite about that, but only time will tell. I can't predict anything until this game comes out, until people check it out. But in the meantime, I'd love to hear what your thoughts and opinions are on Horizon Hunters Gathering in the comments below. Do you think it looks compelling? Is it a kind of game that you like for Guerrilla to be making coming out of the Horizon series? Or would you have preferred for Guerrilla to stick with just honing in on Horizon 3 and putting all of their resources on that. And do you think Horizon Hunter's Gathering has potential, or do you think it'll, in the long term, turn out to be just another dead live service? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.